5 seconds to the open. You ready?
Who wants to get this thing started right about now?
Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly with your host, Jerry Robinson.
Welcome.
Not just some guru.
Oh, really?
Your host is an economist and a best-selling author.
What an interesting news item. I'd better write that down.
And just someone who likes to make money and help you to make money. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly. And here he is, Jerry Robinson.
And I never said, I guess I'm here, 64 days? I never said repeal and replace Obamacare. You've all heard my speeches. I never said repeal it and replace it within 64 days.
On my first day, I'm going to ask Congress to immediately send me a bill to repeal and replace Obamacare. Immediately repealing and replacing the disaster known as Obamacare. Immediately repealing and replacing Obamacare. We will be able to immediately repeal and replace Obamacare.
I never said repeal and replace Obamacare. You've all heard my speeches. I never said repeal it and replace it.
Together we're going to deliver real change that once again puts America first. That begins with immediately repealing and replacing the disaster known as Obamacare. I've been saying this for a long time.
I never said repeal and replace Obamacare. You've all heard my speeches. I never said repeal it and replace it.
I've been saying this for a long time. My first day in office, I'm going to ask Congress to put a bill on my desk getting rid of this disastrous law and replacing it with reforms that expand choice. You're going to have such great health care at a tiny fraction of the cost, and it's going to be so easy.
I never said repeal and replace Obamacare. You've all heard my speeches. I never said repeal it and replace it.
And it's going to be so easy.
Friends, greetings to you around the world. So grateful that you're tuning in to Follow the Money Radio. Of course, my name is Jerry Robinson, economist, author. Find us online at followthemoney.com. Well, this is going to be so easy, repealing and replacing this Obamacare. President Trump now, of course, dealing with a major setback to his presidency, one of many that the president has faced over the last several months, coming into office with much glee on the part of his supporters, lots of promises of winning that was going to be in the future, and yet here we are mired in political disagreements. Here we are just in the middle of the year after President Trump has been elected. The new GOP healthcare bill, Trump Care, has failed spectacularly. There were just not enough votes to put this bill through. And there's not even, by the way, enough votes, according to the latest reports, for Obamacare to be repealed. Now, remember that we are talking about Obamacare, right? Which, going all the way back to the post-financial crisis, right after the financial crisis in 2008, my book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, had come out. And prior to the election of President Barack Obama, there was not a lot of interest on the part of Republicans in hearing about the financial mess that the country was in. But I remember in 2009, right after President Barack Obama was elected, my phone began to ring off of the hook from GOP outfits as well as the Tea Party, as they wanted me to come out and speak against government spending. And it was interesting because government spending has always been a problem. In fact, it was a problem underneath the George W. Bush administration, taking our deficits and our debt to new all-time highs and doubling them practically. But whenever President Obama came into office and he promised health care for the poor, this was simply a line that many GOP conservatives just simply could not cross. And so I remember being invited to Tea Party events and GOP events. I turned down many of them because I really am not that political. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I laugh at both sides. I mean, I really do. In fact, I do get a lot of hearty laughter out of the political process, but that's really about it. There was a time in my past whenever my blood would boil because the liberals did this, right? Or the liberals did that. I mean, there was a time when I ingested Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage, and even for a very small, brief part of time, Glenn Beck. I mean, I ingested that kind of toxic brew and really let it get underneath my skin until I realized that those guys were just nothing more than entertainers. And now we see even the person in office is dodging his own promises. Friends, this is really what you need to wake up to, is that politics has really become quite a joke. And it's not a joke, the policies they're debating. I mean, they're debating real people's lives. I mean, the healthcare issue is a very important issue. The things that they're debating are extremely important, but the way they go about that debate is similar to, you know what it's similar to? It's similar to pro wrestling. Whenever I was a kid, I remember I had a cousin who was very into pro wrestling. Like, I think she called it wrestling at the time. And, you know, I would watch it because it was on, and I would see that these people would get so into their particular wrestling star. You know, they really believed that this guy was the guy, and he was really mad. You know, he'd be standing at the microphone, and he's really mad at his opponent, and he's talking trash on his opponent. And as I think back to those days of seeing, you know, pro wrestling on the television whenever I was a young boy, it reminds me of today's political environment. It really is similar or akin to pro wrestling. Both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, are paid by the same corporate interests, right? They both have corporate masters, so to speak. And oftentimes they're the same exact corporations, right? The corporations just simply want a friend in Washington. And so what you'll find is that many of these politicians, most of them, of course, have been completely bought, and they are nothing more than, you know, wrestling stars on the television bashing the other side for your pleasure for some reason. For some reason, we seem to get a kick out of seeing these politicians trash each other on television, just like pro wrestling. So it was a bad week for the GOP with the healthcare situation just completely spinning out of control. And now now remember, the GOP voted more than 60 times during the Obama administration to repeal Obamacare. They voted more than 60 times to repeal Obamacare. 60 times, right? That was during Obama's presidency. Of course, those repeals never stood a chance of ever actually making it through and becoming law, even after the Supreme Court had dubbed that Obamacare was constitutional. They still insisted upon trying to repeal a constitutional health care law, and they did not succeed in getting that actually turned into law. But the promises that we heard from the GOP all throughout the 2016 cycle and the 2012 cycle, 2014 midterms, and by the way, we have 2018 midterms coming up, and it's just always the same. It's always the same thing. And so what they're going to do is they're going to tell us about how they're going to do this and how they're going to do that. And of course, we know how the whole cookie ends up crumbling. The GOP, though, voted more than 60 times to repeal the Obamacare law. And once Trump got into office, once he took control of the White House, the Republicans now have total control. They have control of the Senate with a majority. They have control of the House of Representatives, and they have control, as we mentioned, of the Oval Office. So the question is if they are in control of all of these things, then why is their agenda that they promise to the American people not being pushed through? What is the hang-up? What is the problem?